hemp was such a critical part of the entire industry. It was law in the 16th century that you had to grow a patch of hemp in your backyard.
The plant was really a regular part of life for thousands of years. I grew up near a town in the UK called Hempstead, which is Anglo-Saxon for heavenly hemp fields. So, even back then they were naming communities after the plant.
It's interesting that oil today is kind of similar to what hemp was a few hundred years ago, and it's pretty true. Australia was founded in part certainly to be a hemp colony, like North America was. Because back in the day, sailing ships ruled the world. Their sails were all made of hemp. The corking in the boat was hemp. The Endeavour had 11 tonnes of hemp on it, someone worked out. To find a new colony with a new climate that could grow hemp, fantastic. And it was one of the first things grown here.
The Northern Rivers has always been in the fight, and there's a lot of people here who understand the benefits of this plant.
People have been coming here, the last 50 years to score pot on the street, and fantastic, I reckon, somewhere you could go. So then in 1973, the Australian Union of Students decided to have a Back to the Earth kind of festival. So they searched everywhere in the end looking for a place, and Nimbin was a closed down dairy town. The only cop in town said, yeah, it'd be probably good for the village. You can have the festival here. So the Aquarius Festival happened on the country just out the back here, and the hippies bought half a dozen of the closed buildings in town. People came on special trains from Melbourne and Adelaide and Sydney to this festival, and it got world recognition and went off. The locals had no idea it would happen. That was kind of the beginning of a movement, because if you want to go back to the earth and grow some veggies, it's much easier up here in the subtropics. So it's got that history of alternative lifestyle and people making an effort to have a new lifestyle where we help each other instead of compete with each other. The whole society's like competing with each other. It's nuts. So we started Mardi Gras after a really bad year of helicopter raids. I think 29 years ago. We marched from the old butter factory up to the cop shop and had a great day. Hundreds of people came, it was hilarious. We were also angry and pissed off and sick of being judged. So on the spot vowed we're going to do this every first weekend till we're no longer criminals. So it's gone. In the beginning it was fantastic, very casual, thousands of people came. It's often wet, that May time, so when it was a sunny weekend we got huge crowds. And there were no cops and there were no trouble. People would have a blanket on the footpath selling their buds. It was beautiful. Anyway, that's all gone. And over the years we had to put in development applications, we had to get insurance. Now we've got to barricade the roads in case of, dramas, and it's become expensive, it's difficult. The last 5 years the police have done roadblocks on all 3 roads into Nimbin. Now they saliva test everyone. People just don't come.
The hemp industry and movement in the Northern Rivers is booming at the moment. There's all sorts of different dimensions happening. There's small-scale food providers, different skincare products. The Hemp Embassy in Nimbin and the Hemp Shop in Mullumbimby provide a platform where those products can be given out. There's a lot of exciting things happening and more people getting involved, but there is still a bit of a long way to go.
We've outlawed nature's safest and most effective medicines in place of those that are not very safe or effective. So Ananda stands for change, using ancient medicines that really can help cut to the core of human suffering, and we're going to start doing that with cannabinoid medicines.
Where I feel hemp culture fits in with this movement is by trying to bring the information and educate the public, and I guess bring it to the mainstream, because cannabis doesn't have to be just for hippies or for ganja smokers or stoners. Cannabis is something that can be used by everyone, regardless of where you come from or your views. And I think that's our biggest hurdle at this point with cannabis. It's the stigmas that are still attached to it, even now in 2021. And I guess our job is to try and release the plant of that by showing people all its amazing potential.
I grew up in Sydney and moved up to the Northern Rivers about 7 years ago to study permaculture. Me and my partner Leon really decided that we wanted to add a positive solution And hemp really came up at that time. Our vision is really about growing as much hemp as possible to really boost the whole industry. It's about replacing like harmful products with more environmentally friendly hemp products, but it's also about encouraging young people to get back on country, back on the land, and be able to cultivate a living from the land that isn't harmful.
Particularly thanks to Nimbin and the Hemp Embassy and all the work that they've done over the years to fight for the cause, it's become, I guess, the emerald triangle as such of the fight for hemp and cannabis, because so many people here have seen its benefits and have a different understanding of hemp. And this area, being the area that it is, has always leaned in more direction of not sort of adhering just to mainstream views or let's say propaganda, and having their own opinions and views on whether it be political or environmental. So that's given this area a stronghold for people who really want to promote the plant, and its benefits nationwide. You could say a good chunk of the cannabis movement is really happening here with hemp farmers, medical cannabis clinics, research and growing is definitely coming from this area.
Most people like hemp because they say that it's a really short time period that you grow it in and it gives you a lot. If you were growing for fibre, you just grow for 3 months. And if you were growing for seed, you'd do a smaller variety that only grew for 3 months as well. So it'd only be like that big, fully headed, and then you could come and harvest it with a combine harvester, quite small, or a smaller herb harvester. So even though we are growing in a small space, we are maximising our return because we're receiving a lot more seed. And because we're a herb farm here too, we are able to grow on a small space and have a high value product still through the organic certification, through the fact that it's grown with a lot of medicinal herbs all around it. And it's quite hard to find organic hemp seed oil that's grown locally in Australia. But there's also the regenerative farming aspect. We're growing here in a paddock that has grown nothing in it for definitely 10 years plus. It's been a cow paddock. And here we are growing our first crop of hemp and it looks lush as. So the benefits in that sense are, yeah, sequestering carbon, creating habitat, creating shade. Like we'd be in the stark sun here if it wasn't for these hemp plants, and they've created all this shade. It's almost like a small tree, really. But the cool thing with hemp is even if you grow a small amount, you can still do a lot with it and maximise your return and create interesting products. The infrastructure is a bit lacking, even though it's building up.
Whenever an industry is a smaller industry, there's higher costs involved, basically because it's still such a niche market and it's still such a small industry.
On a small scale, there's really smart people designing their own infrastructure to process the hemp. But on a large scale, it isn't really there yet. There's nowhere actually in Australia that we could process these hemp fibres. The only way we've been able to do it is getting a cane juice machine from the markets and doing it ourselves, like over and over.
You know, in the last 80 years since Prohibition, think of the advancement in machinery technology. Hemp's been left out. Got fantastic new processes for harvesting wheat and cotton and the rest of it. So we just need to come up to date with stuff, and it will come. It will happen. Hemp farming will be massive in 50 years' time. It'll be huge.
If you go to any hemp shop, there's nothing that is made in Australia. Even though it's made in China, it's still quite expensive because
there's so many more costs involved around getting everything done. I can definitely see once it builds up its popularity and becomes more used or more available, those costs will come down drastically, and it should eventually be a far cheaper alternative to all these other industries. I think it's just about pushing it forward and getting it more to the mainstream.
The wages are so high here, and that's why most people moved their processing plants to China. They've been working with hemp for thousands of years. Like, they know how to do hemp. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're processing their hemp cloves, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep trying to make it happen. And I think the thing with hemp is it's such a community plant. It's so nice to work with that perhaps you could have lower wages with more beneficial environments to the person, like food being provided, accommodation, training, learning, and that's a way that we could have a hemp fibre industry in Australia. Until we kind of do that and until we grow enough hemp and have the proper machines here, that really the state government should be providing, because that's what like industry and agriculture is meant to all be about, then we won't really see any hemp shirts being made in Australia. It is about creating industries in our country that can help young people have jobs that are a little bit more exciting than your average job that you're offered when you're a young person.
Hemp embassy was pretty much a lone voice in the wilderness for a long time. It's slowly changed, the last 10 years especially, I think, but with that change has come the legal medical cannabis industry. And quite a bit of that has come into the Northern Rivers, I'm seeing, because they'll get sympathy, they'll get understood and appreciated here.
Broadly, cannabis is cannabis sativa, cannabis indica and cannabis ruderalis, which is a bit useless these days. The plants have all been bred so much. It's a botanical classification based on how they look. So the sativas are tall and thin and the indicas are short and stubby.
Now, the cannabis plant itself has a much broader spectrum of terpenes and other cannabinoids that the hemp may not have as much. So therefore its use in medical is often much more effective.
So hemp varieties which have been developed for the seed, which is highly nutritious, a superfood, in fact, I'd say. High protein, top omegas, better than fish oil, better for the planet than fish oil. And the fibre is uniquely strong, flexible.
In hemp, it's made its way pretty much to the mainstream now as a food. I mean, hemp seeds and oils and everything you can pretty much get everywhere now, which is great.
So you can consume the hemp seed oil raw, put it in your salads, smoothies. It's got a high nutritional value, but it's also really environmentally appropriate, able to tolerate the harsh weather conditions of the Northern Rivers.
But yeah, it's definitely the industries I think that are really going to benefit the most, like your clothing and plastics and building. I think that's where we'll really see some of its benefits as a sustainable crop that requires far less water, pesticides, and produces much more than traditional materials. It is a very versatile plant. I think what we can see at the moment becoming the forefront of mainstream use is hemp fibres and fabrics for your clothing. It's starting to make its way into the building and materials as well. Hempcrete has a lot of benefits, resistance to, say, earthquakes, flexibility, heat resistance, the insulation properties. We're starting to see more hemp bioplastics as well. We all know that plastics are causing a large burden on the planet.
I don't know if we're going to have everything out of hemp plastic. Like that would be a lot of hemp to be made. But if it can kind of come in and join the other bioplastic industries, then that's amazing. Its strong point is in its strength. And that's where you have like the bulletproof car, sailing ships with like hemp rope.
The idea that cannabis can only be smoked is a consequence of prohibition. Medically, legally, in this country, you can consume cannabis with flower, you can vaporize it.
Which is still inhaling into the lungs, but without the actual smoke itself. And then we've got things like the oral mucosal, which would be sort of sublingual absorption as well as digestive absorption.
So medicinally, the way I prescribe it, we use consistent regular dosing and we're really aiming for kind of sub-psychoactive levels. That manipulates this endocannabinoid system. The
endocannabinoid system and its relation to cannabis is interesting because the endocannabinoid system is actually one of the largest receptor systems in the body, and it's responsible for so many different functions and modulating the homeostasis of so many different other systems within.
What it really boils down to is a few receptors, CB1, CB2. CB1 receptors located in the brain, central nervous system. CB2's in kind of the periphery, immune cells, certain organs.
And the reason it became called the endocannabinoid system was because the molecule, such as anandamide and 2-AG, were almost identical to that of, say, THC. So it became the endogenous cannabinoid system as we know it now.
But broadly speaking, this system returns us to balance. So what we've discovered is that we can take phytocannabinoids, plant cannabinoids, and give them to humans, and then it restarts that system.
As far as negatives are concerned with cannabis, I think that any medicine can also be a poison, and that's something to understand, that not just because something is therapeutic means that you can just have as much as you want of it. It's probably less severe than as we see with more common drugs such as alcohol, but there's still definitely an element for abuse and it should still be respected with the integrity as a medicinal plant that it is.
The ultimate intention behind legalisation is ending a pointless and silly war on humans, on people doing things that make them happy or help them connect.
It's also for us about people having access to a medicine that can help them enjoy their life and relieve them of pain, and especially people dying. Fantastic medicine if you're dying, mate. You can sleep, you relax, you lose that pain in your body.
My belief is that even apart from, say, being clinically diagnosed with the condition, I think if someone chooses to use cannabis as a form of relaxation or their way of unwinding, which is what we call recreational use, I think that should be an adult choice.
And then there's the environmental thing, like cannabis takes all the poisons out of the earth. It's fantastic. They used it around Chernobyl to clean up the nuclear fallout. There's lots of reasons to end the drug war, but none more than to stop the bias and the abuse that's happening to people. And the more people use it, the more they're going to get some enlightenment. That's what we need. We need a new attitude to the earth, to ourselves, to each other.
Maybe the effects on consciousness and community and healing will actually lead to sustainable change amongst the human race. But if we don't do it, we're never going to find out. And if we carry on like we're going, it's all over anyway. So we've got nothing to lose, really.